Here we go. Okay, so today what we wanted to talk about is, as the title says over there, growing non-newcomers in the working group. And what we said in the email was growing them towards potentially becoming working group chairs. In other words, how do we groom people to take our place eventually? So what we want to do today is not make this a training, but make this more of a conversation, because I think that we can really benefit not just from different points of views. Some of you who are here have been chairs for a very, very long time. So you have experience on not only running your working groups, knowing what is important in them, and of course understanding how we can grow those people, right, non-newcomers, to become eventually more involved, to become more active in the working group, and to become, or to be ready at some point to be working group chairs. The intent of this, of course, not to get anyone worried about the fact that we're going to replace everyone or anything like that, but we do have a healthy turnaround of chairs. In the last couple of years, Aaliyah, Deborah, and myself, we have become ADs. We have replaced at least 4 or 5 chairs from that, maybe 6 chairs, I think, just from us moving to a different job. In the last year or so, we have had a couple of new working groups, so we have had chairs for that as well. And several of you have decided to maybe reduce your load or other things. So there's always a need to start thinking about how do we get there with new chairs and the chairs that we're going to need for that. So I put together a couple of slides to sort of guide the conversation. But the idea is, as I said, for this to be a conversation, not to be a one-sided conversation of me talking to myself, but for us to actually share our experience. So with that said, again, the intent is how do we grow people to eventually become working group chairs. So what I want to start with is, since this is a conversation, for you guys to start talking about your experience as chairs, trying to look at motivation, how can we eventually motivate other people to become chairs, what has motivated you to become a chair, when did you decide that this was a good thing? Was there a point in time that you thought this could be a thing for you, that we just ask you and that's it? That's what happened to me. I never thought about it. Someone asked me and I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. So anyone want to say something?
You just come at this from an interesting angle, because for me, I became a chair because there was a working group that I pushed to create in the routing area long ago. It's a long defunct working group, but it was trying to solve a problem which we thought was going to be real. The technology changed and it was no longer relevant. But I ended up chairing it because I pushed really hard to create it, which is different. So that was why I ended up chairing first time. Since then, it's been generally, I think I can help here.
Right. So in your case, initially, Joel, was more about I'm motivated to work in the IETF. I want this to go forward, so sure, I'll chair this.
Yeah, well, I've been working in a lot of working groups, and then we established the routing over large clouds working group, which Andrew at least Andy remembers. It goes with. So yeah, it was, hey, this needs to happen. I'll help make it happen. But that's not how we encourage other people to be able to become chairs. I mean, the obvious tool in our toolkit, and I hope it's not the only one, but it was the only one I could think of, is getting people to be secretaries, to take minutes, to participate. Also getting people to do reviews, getting people to participate more visibly and in more diverse ways helps them be ready to be chairs.
Yes, I fully agree about that. One of the slides that I have later is actually a blank slide where I want to collect some of those thoughts of how do we get them to participate more. Because just like you, start thinking about, yes, how do we motivate them or how do we get them ready? So anyone else who wants to share their experience of how they became chair, or why did you become a chair?
Sure. So I guess I can go, and then maybe we can go around the table. I'm curious about some of the other folks on the call because they've been chairs longer than I've been in the IETF. I guess I'd say I became a chair. I guess a combination. I'd done a lot of the work on fast reroute, obviously, and that work had died down in RTGWG, but I've been one of the more active participants in it for a while. And so when it became time when the ADs decided that they really ought to treat it as a regular working group and not chair it themselves, then I guess I looked like a reasonable candidate. And by that point, I'd already made the decision, or sort of the mental crux, Avicii was in the middle of dying, of course, that it was really had been in the middle of dying. So I'd made that change of, really caring about getting technology out there so that it was going to be able to be used regardless of what happened to a particular company. That was a chance to actually help change and shape what the internet was going to be. So when I got asked, that was, I was excited by that. And then, of course, I2RS, much like Joel's case, was something where I thought it was the right thing to do at the time and was helping, create it. So that was a much easier and obvious case. I know. AC, do you want to tell us your story?
I'm gonna pass. Actually, somebody's knocking at my door. A worker.
Okay, let's go.
I'll come back later.
Okay. I was just going to go alphabetically. I don't know, Andy, how did you first become a chair? What got you motivated about doing IETF and participating?
It was kind of similar to Joel. I had stuff that I wanted to get done in the IETF, and this is a long time ago. You're talking about, talking about back in the 80s and 90s here. But as I recall, there was stuff that needed to get done, and someone needed to lead it, so I volunteered. And at one point, I was chairing a couple groups simultaneously. And then when I went on to the IAB, I gave up chairing the working group I was doing at that time, so I could concentrate on the IAB. And then when I came off the IAB, it just happened that Stuart at that time was chairing PWE 3, and as I was coming off the IAB, he was going on to the IESG. So he asked me if I'd be willing to replace him as PWE 3 chair. So I did that. So I was back to being a chair.
Chris?
Okay.
You're one of the newer chairs.
Yeah. So I had been pretty heavily involved in basically the main documents at that point coming out of RTGWG, which were remote LFA and then obviously the MRT stuff. And so I was pretty heavily involved in those documents. And when you became an AD, Alvaro, Lee asked me, and it seemed like something that I could do. I could do at least as good a job as you were doing, Alvaro. So I figured I would do it. That was a joke. You get it?
Sure.
The problem is we're all on. The problem is we're all on mute, so you can't hear us laugh.
Okay. Good. So yeah, I mean, it seemed like something that I could certainly do and could find the time to do. So I went ahead and did it.
Great, Chris. Thank you. So just going down the list. There you go. You unmuted yourself now.
Yeah. So how did I become a chair? Adrian did this mistake. He asked Fatai and myself if we were willing to become chairs of the SICAMP when Lou and Deborah moved to TISA. Actually, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised because I was expecting some sort of more mixed pairs, in the sense that I was expecting something like, I don't know, a more experienced chair like Lou, with a new chair like Fatah or myself, and Deborah together with the other. So I was surprised to see that we had two young chairs, new chairs at the same time for the working group. Well, actually, well, Deborah is not here to say we are not doing well. So I can tell you that we are not doing that bad.
Oh, come on, you guys are living up to everyone's expectations. Everyone had confidence that you guys can pull it off.
And what else? When it was immediately after the last reorganization, so it was, I guess, 1 year and something ago. What motivates me? Well, actually, I had been an active participant for many years before becoming chairman, something like 6 or 7 years. So it was an interesting next step in the IETF path. And I was happy that Adrian thought I was a good candidate to take the role, and I'm willing to continue. It's something I like.
Great, Daniela. Thank you so much. Donald, let's hear from you.
Well, yeah. So I think quite a while ago when I first became a chair, I'm not sure which working group it actually was, but there were ones where I'd been sort of doing work in the area. The two earliest ones I think were XML digital signature and the IETF trade working group. So the trade thing was about a stored value card system. And it had decided, of course, that the IETF and other organizations were too slow, so it would do its own standards thing. And it sort of did its own standards thing, and then after a while it decided, well, you know, really it's a lot of effort, and it's not really clear it ends up being that much faster in the long run. So maybe we should just move this effort into the IETF. So yeah, a bit of off and stuff, and I decided swung up as an IETF working group in the applications area. And XML digital signature was also kind of interesting because the W3C had been claiming forever that it was going to do that, but there was no visible progress. So I sort of started a bit of boss in the IETF, and there was a bunch of political wrangling, and it ended up being a working group being formed. This one working group was simultaneously an IETF working group and a W3C working group, and its output documents after leaving the working group then went up through both processes in parallel, and you ended up getting issued this W3C document and an IETF document, something which has never been done again. And I had a co-chair who was more of a W3C person. So anyway, I don't know, I'd had a lot of experience before, like doing work in volunteer groups and you know, presiding over meetings and stuff like that. So I wasn't at all afraid of being a chair, and it seems, you know, reasonably straightforward. It probably was a little simpler way back then. So come a little bit more technical and intricate with the systems get more automated and process gets a little more persnickety. But it's sort of, you know, went drifted into it that way, and you know, later became co-chair of Trail for quite a few years and various other things, and it looks like I may be acquiring another chairmanship shortly. So I don't, remember there being anything particularly special about it. It just seemed like something that didn't seem particularly hard to me, and that I wanted to do to get work to progress in areas I was interested in.
Perfect. So, Jeff, you're up next on the list. You came up in a couple of minutes late. We, just for everyone else who came after you even, so we're talking today about how to grow others, how to grow non-newcomers in the working group so they can eventually potentially become working group chairs. And we're just talking about right now, how do you guys become chairs at the beginning? Why do you consider this? When was the first time? What motivates you? So if you want to say a couple of things, Jeff, that would be great.
Sure. I was able to take that from context. So I got involved because Sue sort of ambushed me into IETF by saying, hey, you're working on this code, for BGP stuff, and you obviously found some issues with the specs. Why don't you send some emails to some people? And I think that that's really sort of indicative of how people sort of get ambushed into doing IETF work. It's basically related to something they're doing, relating to something that they have, some sort of passion to advance. And I got sort of involved enough that I was doing a huge amount of the standards work, for BGP, going through the 4271 effort. And around that time, Alex Zinnin, basically was looking for somebody to help run what he called the shortest-lived working group ever, which was supposed to be 2 sessions to help standardize BFD, which Dave Katz and Dave Ward were working on. And rather than doing it as individual AD submissions, decided that there was probably enough lingering work necessary to get things through standards that deserved actually having a chair. So Alex basically fooled me into taking on my first chair position. Unfortunately, since I'm modestly good at project management stuff, I sort of stuck through with it. But sort of end of the day, it's same story as everybody else. There was motivating work that needed to get done, enough motivation to actually make it happen, and that's how I originally got the BFD chair.
Thanks. We already heard from Joel, so we're going to go down to Lou.
I'm not sure how helpful the answer will be to how I got involved to the question of how do we get new people involved. Like Andy, it was a little bit ago, and things were a bit different then. At the time, the working group I was heavily involved with, we spent our working group meetings discussing technical issues on basically one topic and one document. And when the then chair had to step down, I was the document editor or co-editor, so it made sense to bring me on as co-chair and push through the issues related to resolving that document and that technology. So that's how I became chair, and more recently I have stupidly not said no often enough. So I continue to be chair of a few things. That's it.
Great, Lou. Thank you.
Well, I guess the only other thing is that first working group is an answer to a trivia question, which is, what is IPv5? But anyway. And that was the SP2 Plus working group.
Luigi.
Yep. I actually was already secretary of the working group I'm chairing with Joel. I mean, I was heavily involved in the working and also developing some code. Then Terry and Joel were looking for secretaries, so I volunteered at the same time like Wasim. Then Terry decided to step down and suggested my name as a replacement. And after some discussion with Brian, I accepted to be co-chair of this working group. So, and at the beginning of this WebEx, Arya and Joel were stating about the fact of how important it is to involve people with secretary's role reviews and also shepherding is possible, and that's exactly how I became a working group chair.
Great, Luigi, thank you. So I think we need to move on. So Sue and Pavan, unless you have something you really want to call out about your experience as becoming a chair, I'm going to move on if that's okay. I think we're hearing, thank you. I think we're hearing a couple of common topics. One of them is, I had an idea or I had some work that I was doing that maybe needed to go through. I was really interested, and so I became the chair. The other topic is around I'm participating in this work. I was maybe the editor. I was pushing some of the documents. I'm a really good participant in the working group, and that's why I sort of stood out and became or was asked to be the chair. A couple of you, including myself, were probably surprised of being asked to be the chair because we maybe not fit in any of those two. I personally get a little bit worried about looking at the high participation people, because many times these are the people that are contributing, of course, to the work. And what that means, of course, is that we need people to move the process along, not necessarily only people to contribute to the work. And just like in our own daily life, not always the best engineers make the best managers. And so we need to keep that in mind as well. Now with that, the next thing I want to talk about is, okay, now we're the world chairs, what the heck do the chairs do? Instead of going through again and trying to brainstorm and things like that, I went and looked at this RFC 2418 that honestly I hadn't read before, and it talks about working group guidelines and procedures. And it lists these things over there that are what the working group chairs are responsible to do. Now, what I want to do is look at these, tell me if you think there's anything missing. What I want to possibly identify as well is what are the really important parts of being the chair that may refer to these process things. Most of these are process, of course. What are other things that are missing? What are the important parts of being a chair? How did we learn, or how do we get our experience of becoming good chairs and being able to master all these tasks?
So, Alvaro, there is actually one big item that's missing from here, which is obviously not the RFC, and that's basically creating and ensuring the continuity of the IETF culture and the way we get things done.
Okay, good thing.
And basically, all of those things that are above that bullet that you're adding is really the output that we're trying to do. Obviously, those are things we tend to stick in our RFCs. That's the output, but the process by which things happen, teaching people how to participate in that process and getting them to do the work is really a combination of what you're asking about for how do you actually get a chair, is how you actually get people to be involved in the working group. And for my part, I tend to consider chair, or honestly just strike the word chair, any position of responsibility to get work moving forward. It's really this most efficient in IETF just because people are trying to get the work done.
Right. So, and I agree. I mean, the other things are all process oriented. I think your point about the IETF culture is a very important one. Anyone else want to point out what other things are missing, or support what is the most important part?
Well, one of the pieces that I think is important is essentially it ends up being the human element. It ties into ensuring working group process and content management, but a lot of it ties to pulling authors who are interested in something together, or people who are interested in contributing, and make sure that they know each other and feel comfortable talking to help pull together the kinds of discussions that need to happen in order to make progress go on. So a lot of the softer management types of skills as opposed to simply the mechanical process bits.
Right. So Alvaro, I've sort of missed something in the transition to this. We're still talking about recruiting non-newcomers to be, in a position to evaluate them for chairs and so on, and developing the skills, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so this is the kind of skills that we want them to develop. Is that what you're?
Well, so right. So what I thought we would do is sort of back into that and talk about what the chairs do, right? Then talk about what kinds of skills do we need to perform this work. We look at the original list, right? That from RC 2418. That's all about process, right? So you obviously need to know the process. As I think Jeff and Ali are pointing out, there is a lot more than just knowing what the process is, and issuing a last call or asking for publication or whatever it is, but making sure that the working group actually works. And I translated what Leah said as working group as a team, right? Making sure that the people are comfortable with each other, the discussions happen, that we don't go not only down rat holes, but even worse, personal conflicts and things along those lines, which does take other skills, right? More of the maybe soft management skills in there. So if we identify those things, then we can think about what are ways we can attract other people. At the very beginning, when Joel started talking, he said that getting people involved, right, is the way that comes to his mind, which is the way that comes to my mind. Getting people to shepherd documents, getting people to review documents, getting people to be part of the process themselves, right? Which I think is great because it covers that long list from 2418, but there is more than that, right? Clearly, if we just know the process, it's hard to manage all the other software parts. So that was what was in my mind, Chris, to sort of back into that. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone else except me, but that's what was in my mind.
I mean, obviously, it makes sense to me. I guess one of the reasons I was talking about the softer skill pieces is because I see other opportunities beyond the, sorry, let me back up. One of my concerns is I hear us talking about the secretary role as being a way to train chairs, and that helps teach people about the process, and to some extent it lets them, depending upon how the working group is being run, lets them see what's going on and the things that the chairs are doing. But there are other ideas, like if you have somebody and you ask somebody to lead a design team or to be on the design team, help pulling consensus together, that's another way of growing some of the softer skills. Or if there's a topic that the working group needs to work on, then asking somebody else to help lead that conversation and guide it is another way of sort of providing an opportunity to think about the skills. Because one of the things, to me at least, that stood out was nobody stepped forward because and said, oh yes, I'll be a chair because this is really what I want to do. I mean, willing to do it, yes, but the main thing that stood out to me is everyone said there was work that needed to be done and I could see somebody needed to do this. And the thing to remember about that, or the thing that strikes me, of course, is that as long as we are going ahead and it looks as if the work is getting done, other people aren't going to make that observation, oh, there's work to be done, okay, let me go ahead and do it. So that's, sorry to grab it, but that's a couple observations.
Thank you. So, Sue, I see your hand up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things that recently has come to my mind based on R2S and some of IDR work is the pacing regarding certain specs. If you want to get something done or you want to get new interfaces done, say you start a new working group or you start a new effort, there's a real pacing to it. In other words, there's both the technical work and there's how to keep up the flow of people's interest and how to get things done in a particular way. That's not really working group process or content management. It's really a human piece of knowing how to continue to get things done and keep excitement going. Yep, that's it.
This is Donald. I would say one way to related to that is that an important thing is essentially a balance between fairness and progress. You know, if you push things fast enough, some people may feel they're getting screwed or left out or ignored or something. But if you wait until 100% of the people are worn out from giving their argument, even if they're in the minority, then you won't get enough progress. So it's a balancing act.
Okay. Can other folks say, we've got this list, what do you think the most important aspect of being a chair is? Does anyone want to describe their opinions?
Do you guys think or agree that this softer part of keeping the interest, balancing, working as a team, the overall IETF culture, all these things embody what is the most important part, or do you think the process is the most important part?
I think the most important part for the chair, because you can teach people the process, is to have sort of a litmus test on the work and give priority to the things that are actually going to be deployed, and then after that provide one level of, you're not going to have two chairs a lot of the time that will be able to do this. Provide a kind of a review that provides a litmus test as to how the technology fits into the big scheme of things. And I see the process as secondary. And you also have to be fair. Like, you have to be fair especially if the working group has the bandwidth to do it, to, let, like Donald said, you can't be too judgmental. You have to, let things play out with the whole working group having their chance to review and hopefully give their opinion on it. But there are some technologies that, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like, it seems like they just kind of move along, and maybe you move those to experimental or whatever and move on. But you really have to make sure that, you have to make sure that the important things get priority and get a good review and get through the process. Most notably, I won't give an example of any of the bad ones, but I'll give an example of a good. I'd say, like, for instance, in OSPF, we've been giving prioritization to segment routing and to trying to move to OSPF v3 for everything. But unfortunately, the implementations haven't come as fast as I would like.
So I think, Casey, you're bringing up a really good point, which is the working group chair as technical leader, not just
a steward of the protocol. Yes.
Right, exactly. Not just making sure that the process works, that the people work together and feel happy together, but also that what we're doing is relevant. And this is maybe a topic for another conversation, because this goes back to, I think, how the IETF works in general, right, which is a bottoms-down approach. Participants come in and say, this is what I want to work on, and it may not always be the right fit or the best fit or the appropriate fit at this time or anything like that. But I think it's a really good point, right? As you said, the chair is steward of the technology that you're in charge of, versus just blindly pushing things around.
And I would say that the top part of the list sort of assumes that the working group has a reason to exist and that it shouldn't just be shut down, whereas the bottom part sort of keeps it going.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the process view versus the you know, why the heck are we here, and can we actually do the work together? Yes. So anyone else want to talk about what they think is the most important? I think we sort of all agree that as Jeff said on the chat, that process is a tool, and that anyone can learn the process. It's really about maintaining, you know, continuity of the working group, looking out from the technology side, et cetera. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the real trick is balancing the level of interest and energy of the people involved, of a volunteer group, with the perhaps some vocal but in the minority voices, with your own personal vision of where things should go. And and to be clear on the last point, it's that your personal vision doesn't win, but your personal vision can give guidance, but you always have to operate on consensus. And that consensus part is you sort of have to nurture the energy to make sure that consensus is across the board and not just your own or those small number of voices. One of the quotes I occasionally tell to people is one person or one group, one special interest working on a document doesn't make a standard. But on the flip side, sometimes you have a bunch of people that have put in the energy to produce something, but then don't necessarily have the energy to carry it through of building the consensus of the rest of the working group. Right. So it's a balancing act.
It also seems though that you're supporting what AC is talking about as, you know, the working group chair as technologist.
You may be working group chair as technologist. It's also may be working group chair as manager of the different interests. You can have both. Certainly, I think a working group chair has to have some high-level vision of correctness from the technology standpoint, but it can be pretty high-level.
But also, I think one has to be very careful, because having a working group chair who has too strong a vision means that it interferes with his ability, it usually, not always, but usually interferes with his ability to correctly judge the working group's consensus, and also interferes with his ability to bring together and resolve disputes within the working group.
I agree completely. That's exactly the balance. That's exactly one of the balances.
Now, one of the important jobs is dealing with, on the one side, encouraging people to participate, because some working groups, people are passive, and on the other side, when you get real disputes, helping get to a good resolution of the argument, not just, oh, we'll just compromise and do this, but a good answer. And you need technical skill to find good answers. But your goal is not to find the answer you like, but to find a good answer that works for the working group. And that is a very people-oriented skill, even though it has a technical component.
And an important part there is a willingness to accept that your personal view isn't necessarily the working group's view. Just like you need to make sure that one loud voice doesn't dominate the working group, doesn't dominate the answer, even though the working group doesn't really support it.
Great. This is great. So now to the real question of why we're here. Okay, given that this is what working group chairs do, right? There's the process part that we all understand. There's that management piece of continuity of the culture, making sure the team works together, make sure that we balance progress, speed, fairness, keeping the people excited, that interest that we were just talking about and energy. We need to remember that this is a volunteer organization. I don't know how many of you are managers like in your day job or something, which is of course different. I can always tell the people I manage, hey, I can fire you tomorrow if you don't do this, right? We can't do that, of course, in the IETF, and that's part of the balancing the energy and the interest and the speed and everything else. We also talked about this part of being the technology steward of the protocol, the working group, et cetera, and having some vision with that consensus in mind as well, of course, which I think, Joel, you made a really good point that this is really a people skill. It's not just about, it's not always about just agreeing on the mid number of bits, right, that we're going to send on a frame or anything like that. Not that anyone has done that before. So the next question is, okay, how do we grow other people? And there are obvious things and that, like, delegate. We can have shepherds, we can have people review documents. That goes more to the process. Aliyah mentioned before that we can provide leadership opportunities around the design team where you have to, sort of a mini working group, right? Call consensus on topic. I think this goes back to what we were just talking about of, maybe have a vision or have an idea of how this should go, but being the chair, I'm not in the best position to make the call myself. And even though I have another co-chair, maybe, we have someone else to make the decision with this other person as well. This is certainly something we can do.
Actually, Alvaro, I want to interrupt because as far as I can tell, the one thing the chair can't delegate is the consensus call. They can delegate almost everything else they do, but the consensus call is the chair's job. And if you can, the AD can step in and help them, can appoint essentially a chair pro tem for a purpose, but I don't think a chair can actually appoint somebody else to judge the working group consensus.
I agree.
Okay, so we're saying it can be done as a process thing. Okay.
But what they can, so while I agree there, you can have somebody to lead a discussion and talk. I mean, it's one of the aspects of a lot of the pieces that we all talked about as the important, whether it's being the technology steward, whether it's judging the energy and pushing the group hard enough but not too hard, and so on. A lot of these that are soft skills are the kinds of things that one learns in part by seeing how do you take people and pull them towards consensus, how do you get them willing to have discussions. And so one of the, for instance, potentials with being a shepherd, depending upon the document that's shepherding, is for some of those documents, you actually get into the same type of let's discuss and understand different viewpoints and so on. And so that's part of why, even though it's a process piece, I think it has some potential for teaching people. Similarly, one of the potential advantages of having a secretary is that it gives them gives the person who's doing the secretary job a chance to see and hear the discussions on the other topics that the working group chairs are doing. And I think there's the potential with being a shepherd to encourage that type of discussion about a particular draft inside the working group beforehand. But one of the questions, how do we teach these skills? One of the things that Danielle talked about is he was surprised not to have not to have an experienced working group chair along with somebody who was new. And that, I think, gets back to sort of one of the ways that we teach new chairs is, I believe the best phrase would be, toss them into the swimming pool and give them somebody to help out and sort of do the apprenticeship model of teaching. So you have someone there they can ask questions of. But that requires, having already identified and grabbed somebody and having them feel comfortable and confident enough in their abilities to do so immediately. Yeah, push them in, exactly.
So, yeah, this is great. Yep, nothing better than test by fire. So, what about the aspect of from the technical side of being the steward? How can we grow others? How can we observe others doing the job maybe before we think they might be ready or on the right path? One thing that I want to say before anyone says anything is, yes, we talked about secretaries, we talked about shepherds or whatever. One thing that I think is important is not setting expectations. I think just because people are secretaries or just because people do a lot of shepherding, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will become the next chair, right, of a specific working group, for example, or that they're in the short list for any or the next spot that opens up or anything like that. So that, I think, is part of the other balancing act that we need to do as managers of the working groups, right? Get people involved, but set the right expectations, tell them how we need them, but not, of course, say, if you do this, we're going to put you on the short list, right? So having said that, going back to how can we grow others, what about from that technical steward, from making sure that people have that vision point of view? Are there things specifically versus looking at their participation, of course, that we can do?
So I'm actually a big fan of having multiple chairs that have different skill sets, and having one person that's really involved in the details and having the one level of vision is great, but you might want to have multiple types of visions. For instance, I've spent, as Daniela talked earlier, I've been a co-chair with Deborah, and I really thought that having me with a typically more of a detailed look paired with someone who had more of a user perspective was really useful. And we're not always so lucky to have a user who's willing to participate as a chair. That's a pretty rare thing. But I think being able to have co-chairs that have complementary skills is really a good thing. I know that's a little tangential from what you were asking.
No, but I definitely agree there, which is, complementary and looking at what we need to complement the working group, yes.
Well, also each other.
And each other, correct, agreed. Anyone else want to?
So I guess one concept, sorry, I've obviously been brainstorming about this a little bit because I feel like it's something we do need to be spending some time on. One idea, one of the things we talked about at the last chair's lunch was the idea of maybe we have a lot of technology which I would describe as being documented with diffs. Here's the new feature, et cetera, but it's hard to get the broader perspective. I don't know if there's enough energy, but certainly one way to see what kind of perspective someone brings and still have them be doing useful work might be asking them to try and pull some of the pieces together or see. I mean, I think the design team stuff, the seeing how they review pieces and what kinds of comments they come in, encouraging the review. I mean, because that's the other part that stands out. And, it also speaks to something that Adrian said to me, which is people live up to what you ask them to do. And so one of the pieces here is having somebody that you respect ask you to do something makes, and saying, I think you're capable of doing this, makes a huge difference in folks' willingness to take on work and actually get it done. Because, they feel like they're living up to a request and they have somebody who says, yeah, I think you can do this. And so one of my questions for this is, to be, if nothing else, I think one of the useful takeaways from this is to encourage folks to think about the skill set and to think about encouraging other people and saying, yes, I think you can do this. Because I feel like that personal touch makes a huge difference.
Yes, I fully agree. So one of the things we obviously want to get out of this is it's not a definite list of what we need to all go do in our working groups. But as we started from the beginning, this conversation of what motivates people, what are the things we can do, how can we interact, so that as we need that in our working groups, we go and do it. One of the questions that I do want to ask, and I don't necessarily expect answers just for you guys to think about this, is can you think of a couple of people, maybe 2, maybe 5, I don't know, that you think today would be good candidates to take on your working group? And if the answer is yes, that's great. If the answer is no, well, what do we need to grow those people? The people that you come in the back of your head and you think, well, maybe this guy could do it. What do we need to do to help them grow a little bit, or to help us grow them a little bit? So those are the kinds of things we want you to take home and think about, and hopefully some of the conversations, especially the experience from others, can help us build better, not only working groups and work better together, but eventually grow others as well.
So I had a thought about sort of the AD's role in when they're appointing chairs. When you are appointing a new chair and you end up appointing someone who's already a chair to chair another working group, that tends to send a message it sends a very strong message to anyone who was considering being a chair that that they're not qualified, or let me put it another way, not doing that and using new chair positions as sort of testing grounds and spreading the potential to evaluate new people is perhaps a good thing to do. So anyways, I'm curious if you give that much consideration.
Yeah, so I think that at least for the chairs that I've had to replace recently, a lot of it has to do with what Lou was talking about complementing the other chair, about complementing the working group. What is the state of that working group? How well do they already work together or not? Are we really throwing someone into a real fire, right? Do we need, because of that fire, someone that maybe has a little bit more experience or not? So there are many things that go into that. And that complement of, we're taking one chair away, how do we fill not only that void, but how do we complement with the other chair, is something really important. And I think depending on the state of the working group, sometimes we probably decide that it's better to go with someone we at least know, right? I don't know how you say it in English, but there's a saying in Spanish that is something like, it's better to have someone, no vale malo conocer que bueno por conocer, which is better to have someone that you already know, that, I don't know, the evil you know than the good, or I don't know, whatever it is. So sometimes we make those decisions that way. Hopefully, we're making also decisions that bring new chairs into the group here.
I guess if I can answer also, I would say that I do always try and figure out if there's somebody, try and hunt for somebody new. But I also suffer from, I only know so many people. I only know so many people in the group, and there are, in each particular working group, and each working group ends up being its own skill set, and it feels very bad to throw somebody into what you know is going to be a tricky or highly political situation as their first place of learning. So, yeah, I mean, this is one of the pieces, one of my motivations for this is to say, look, I want more choices. I want more new people more people who are not chairs, have not been chairs as choices. Yes, I do try and jump in, and I am willing to throw people in. And I do think we need to be having new people as chairs, but it can be very each time it's a leap of faith. And the more you know someone, the less it feels like a leap of faith. And that's not the problem. The problem is trying to evaluate a known and an unknown quantity. So in retrospect, of course, it's easy to say, oh yeah, of course so-and-so would do a good job. But in a number of cases, one's looking at, for instance, okay, this working group has serious issues because there hasn't been enough chairing bandwidth, because of politics, because of bad interactions with other working groups or other ideas, or because the market's doing this and you need someone who's really in that space. So it becomes, each of them is a challenge. My hope and what I want to find is it should be easier and easier to appoint new folks to be working group chairs. But I mean, we just went through a large list of things that an ideal chair should do. And of course, it's always a balancing act and a complement, right, for what the existing chair already has.
I would note that because nobody can know everybody and can much less know everybody well, when it is not extraordinarily delicate, it is a very good idea to issue public calls for chairs so that you get people you didn't think of. I realize you can't always do it, and it can cause a mess in its own ways, and it's really bad if it makes somebody else look bad, or you have to pre-announce somebody stepping down when they're not ready to announce it, etc. There are lots of corner cases, but it does help.
Joel, do you really think that there are cases where potential chairs aren't known by both the ADs and the existing chairs?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There
are cases where there's unknown?
There are people who you wouldn't think of as chairs. They're people you know. You go,
okay.
Yes.
That's a different
Why didn't I think of food? I actually had this happen, not a chairing case, but a different case. It was like, oh, that never occurred to me, and of course that's perfect. That's what I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
and that.
I'm going to try to. I'm going to ask Alvaro. I've had my hand up for a while. I'm going to ask for a ticket sometime in the next couple minutes.
Yes. Before we go to you, Sue, I think Luigi had his hand up too. I think he gave up. But Luigi, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I want to come back on the choice of the ADs for a chair. I understand that there is a lot to consider to name a chair, but on the other side, we the chairs can help. I mean, suggesting new names if somebody is stepping down. I mean, it's kind of different when a new working group is forming, but to replace someone, maybe unless there are both chairs that are stepping down, which I the one remaining can discuss with the ADs and look, if we want new blood, we should consider this name and this name.
Yes, and that is always the case.
Yeah, but maybe we should do it more. That's what my point.
That is always the case because the last thing we.
I know. The other thing, maybe us, the chairs, I guess Lou, if we in the beginning say we should say no more often, in the sense that if we are chairing a working group and we have a proposal to chair a second or the third working group, maybe we should say no, try to find somebody else that has not the same load, and unless really the skills set is really what we need for this working group, of course, we should do it. Okay, we should participate, but maybe that's also something we, the chairs, should consider.
Right. Yes. So, it's always important, of course, that if we're getting a new chair for your working group, for example, that this new person works with you well. So, yes, it should always be the case that we ask the remaining chair. Sue.
It was more trying us to be more proactive in suggesting names and stuff, maybe, and considering new names. It's something that all of us should try to change our mindset. I mean, to trying to do. This discussion is extremely good as a starting point to do that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Sue.
Okay. I want to underscore one place where it's not a good place to get new chairs. And that's where you're trying to use, where you're trying to do a reuse protocol with another working group or another working group in another area. That's bad. And R2S is a reuse working group. I heard one success on reuse, and that apparently came from AC's reuse of part of the MPLS protocol. So, congrats to AC and the folks that did it well.
So, can you restate what you said in a different way? Because I frankly didn't understand it.
Okay. R2S is a reuse protocol. Do you know what a reuse protocol is?
Sorry, the general principle. The first half of your statement, I didn't understand what you meant.
Sure. Do not, the places where it would be a bad thing to create, to perhaps get a new chair in the environment, is cases where there is a difficult political or process situation. I'll use my own working group since that's not value specific, but I would suggest you might have one as well. One where there's a lot of high interaction with other working groups that is necessary, i.e. in a reuse protocol or in a model-based protocol that's being reused by a number of other working groups, tends to be a difficult situation to navigate because you have both the personalities inside of working groups and the needs and the contradictory needs for particular products. So that tends to be a place where it's very difficult to get harmonious consensus. Have I been clearer? Lou?
Yeah, I think what you said is when you have a working group that's going to face a lot of challenges, experience counts.
Experience counts, and it's a bad place to put a new person since they may get burned and with this unfortunate experience, and you would like them to have a positive experience on chairing.
So if I can, just to touch on to this point, I know that there have been, not in routing, of course, but in other areas, there have occasionally been working groups where they're not chartered and not really expected to succeed, and that's a very difficult situation to put somebody new as a chair in. Obviously, I just am appointing 3 new chairs, right? And for all 3 of them, in fact, we don't have a new person. One of them was I2RS, where I appointed Russ White. Now, he hadn't been a current chair, but he was a chair of RPSec in the past. I've also appointed Donald and Russ for chairing Babel, which is coming along quite nicely. And in that case, there were other reasons. In that case, it was a skill set, right? Russ has the distance vector skill set for IGPs that we don't have a lot of folks have. And in this case, quite frankly, Donald's been doing standards and knows what a standard should look like and how to write standards, got the process stuff and the let's just calm down and get work done and moving kind of perspective that the working group really needs, because most of the folks coming in are not going to be those who've been participating for a long time in the IETF, which is, by the way, great. But each of them ends up being its own. It's very, and I say, on the one hand, I say we need to get new chairs, and on the other hand, I'm saying, well, each of these is its own special case. So it's kind of a mixture. In some cases, it's one where I would like to have other choices, not because the people who I picked are not folks who I think are going to be excellent at the job, but because we want to diversify and grow new people. Obviously, we brainstorm with existing chairs. We try to brainstorm with other people in the working group or who are familiar and to get some ideas. Sometimes if you have a problem working group, it's really hard to say, I want to toss someone in and they're going to have to learn not just how to be a chair, but all of the issues for dealing with this particular work, this particular challenging situation.
So I'm going to jump in here since I brought up the topic of what message it sends when you appoint someone who's already a chair as another chair. So there's good reasons in a lot of the cases for the new appointment, but it would actually send quite a good message for that chair to vacate their existing chair job potentially and appoint a new chair into that, where they left. Presumably that working group that they've been at has been running fine. Now, I know we don't want to break what's working, but at the same time, we have a problem with getting new blood in. So if this is a priority, that should be a serious consideration, and it would send a good message.
That is interesting, and you're right. That's something I haven't considered doing in general. I guess it's a combination of don't fix what's not broken, and also an issue around, well, it's the technical stewardship, right? If you have somebody who has been watching and being the technical steward for a working group for a long time, that's a level of competency that's hard to replace, but that doesn't mean it's not a good idea to do some change.
Having been in that circumstance, I can tell you that when that occurred, I and the AD involved had an explicit conversation about that. And I don't think it's appropriate to go into the details, particularly when recorded, but we did explicitly talk about this point. So,
I just wanted to point out that the Babel, had there been the right person with the technical skills and the distance vector technical skills and the bandwidth and the supports to be the co-chair, I think they could have been paired with Donald, a completely new person in that case. But I didn't see that there probably wasn't that person available, and that's why Russ was a good choice.
Certainly, if such a person exists, I did not know them.
Yeah,
and that comes back to the knowing people. So on the one, we don't know. And that's one of the places in here to depend on, to ask you all to be thinking